Good evening, everyone. It is now 3 minutes past 7 o'clock. It is December 12th, 2023. This is the meeting of the Natick Select Board. I call this meeting to order. Let us, we do not have any exec session today. Hooray, hooray. So let's all please rise for the national our Pledge of Allegiance. National anthem. I've been watching too many sports.
I was going to say.
Pledge of Allegiance in a moment of silence. To America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everyone. Okay, and do we have any announcements from the board? Any from the board? Yeah, tomorrow, yeah. Okay, okay. Anybody from the public wish to, we're now into public speak. Any individual may raise an issue that's not on the agenda, and it will be taken under advisement by the board. There will be no opportunity for debate during this part of the meeting. This section is limited to 15 minutes, and any one individual can only speak for 5 minutes. Do we have anyone who wants to speak? Yeah, thank you. Mr. Sidney reminded me that this is being recorded by Natick Pegasus and also streamed.
Thank you very much. Paul Griesmer, town meeting member, Precinct 7, and a member and chairperson of the Charter and Bylaw Review Committee. What I would like to do is read a brief statement on why the CBRC is not and cannot be attending this evening's meeting.
That's on the agenda.
What?
I'll allow it.
So why
it offers context.
Right. When we first learned of this meeting at noon on Friday, that notification didn't allow enough time to schedule and post a meeting in accordance with the open meeting law before Town Hall closed at 12:30, and there was also no opportunity in that short window to check with CBRC members on their availability. The CBRC has previously and has been since advised by our special legal counsel that attendance of a quorum of 4 or more members at a meeting where any one member speaks on subject matters must be posted in accordance with the open meeting law. Accordingly, CBRC members are not attending or participating in this meeting in person or in hybrid without risking an open meeting law violation. All of the work the CBRC has done has actually been a group effort, and the CBRC is committed to maintaining that process. No one should misunderstand the absence of the CBRC from tonight's meeting as any form of a lack of interest. Whatever comments are received and whatever discussion occurs at this evening's Select Board meeting, they cannot have the benefit of the discussion, involvement, explanation, opinion, or comments from the CBRC. In that regard, this evening's discussion will be incomplete. The CBRC will be looking to take that balance of that up at its next scheduled meeting. The next scheduled meeting of the CBRC is planned for Tuesday, December 19th, 2023, and at that meeting, the CBRC will be asking the moderator to present to us the floor amendments received so that we can start an initial public working session on those citizen amendments. The CBRC is committed to its role and obligations under the town charter, which are to review the provisions of the charter and bylaws and make a report with recommendations to the town meeting concerning any proposed amendments or revisions. This responsibility includes proposed changes regardless of author. Toward that end, the CBRC will be obtaining copies from the moderator of the floor amendments so that it can begin its evaluation. We'll also be taking a look probably at the tape of this meeting. I'm going to suggest members do that. And if anyone has any perfecting suggestions, ideas, or opinions, the CBRC has been and always is open to hearing them. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Griesmer. Ms. Goff?
Just a question, is there a, sorry. Is there a known start time and location to the planned CBRC meeting on the 19th? It's just a question.
6 PM.
Location?
Thank you, Ms. Goff. So the location is TBD, so stay tuned.
No, it's here.
Here, I'm sorry, I didn't see the here. You were behind Ms. Goff, and I didn't hear. Sorry. Thank you.
Same bat channel, different bat.
Batch station.
Different bats.
All right. All right. Okay. I'd like to, I'm sorry, Mr. Munich. Go right ahead.
Yes, with reference to public speak, which is commonly titled as topics not included on the agenda. And that is specifically the reason that I rise to speak. Having attended the last sessions of town meeting, the representation was that there would be meetings of the select board and that a special town meeting would be the topic of scheduling. I am discouraged and disappointed that neither on this evening's agenda nor on tomorrow's agenda is even listed a special town meeting. The reason for putting a somewhat abrupt end to the final sessions of town meeting was because of time concerns. And the solution to that was to pick up virtually instantaneously with a special town meeting. That would enable us both to respect the timelines required for things to go through the legislature and also for the town to take care of its perhaps more mundane but nevertheless important financial issues. We don't have anything on this agenda. We don't have anything on the next agenda. That is tremendously discouraging, and it really calls into question the ability for the boards, the town, the entities to be working together. I truly request that at the next possible posting possibility, that this body follow through on what town meeting had been told to expect. Thank you very much.
Okay, anyone else? Mr. Hickey?
Mr. Chair, members of the Select Board, wasn't planning on speaking to that point, but since it seems to be an appropriate topic for public speak, I did review the tape of the November 6th town meeting because I did want to refresh on exactly what was communicated, at least by the chair of the board. Chair noted that there had already been, by that time, robust discussion of a number of proposed amendments, that there was a long way to go. We were 6 sessions into town meeting. Chair specifically noted that an alternative we could consider was to refer to the sponsor the rest of Article 25, 26, and I guess 23 with, and I quote, the prospect of reconsidering them at spring annual town meeting or a special town meeting this winter. Proponents would resubmit, perhaps incorporating changes made based on discussion of amendments that had taken place up to that point. The chair noted that this latter approach would give us additional time to evaluate these amendments, should town meeting choose. And the chair made the only commitment that I believe the chair, having sat in that role, can make, which is to put on an upcoming agenda, which was November 15th, for discussion and, again, I quote, possible decision. And that was it. And the chair did exactly what was committed to a town meeting. Scheduled a meeting of the board for discussion on November 15th. At that meeting, the chair framed what the board was there to discuss and not to discuss, recapped the town meeting had passed A through H, and referred the balance to the sponsor to allow more time for consideration. The chair requested stronger collaboration to achieve, hopefully, consensus. He was not demanding this, but was requesting it. He also needed to know and acknowledged he needed to know what the CBRC's plans for and he called for open meetings and discussion. The select board didn't have the time, and he expressed that he didn't think that he thought town meeting members should hear from the select board on these articles. And on that, I strongly agree. The chair went on to note that in his opinion, we should be less concerned about how quickly we move on these articles and more concerned about getting them right, unintended consequences. Again, I couldn't agree more. That is leadership. I don't believe, at least my view on what the role of the select board is, it's not scheduling aides for an unelected committee of town meeting to pull out calendars and blindly find the 28th day forward from when town meeting adjourned. It's to exercise discretion, judgment, and prudency given the unique vantage point and perspective that the select board has. I applaud the select board for taking a deliberative approach. I don't think anyone should expect the select board to blindly schedule town meetings in the middle of winter without an understanding of how we're going to get from where we were to where we hopefully should be, which is in a better place, whether that's January, February, or whenever. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hickey. Anyone else with comments? No? Anyone online? I can't really see anybody online. No? Okay. Okay, thank you. All right. Much like the prior meeting, I want to set some ground rules for the discussion tonight. And unfortunately, this is a little bit longer than I'd want to have it, but it has a lot of information that we need to provide to make sure that we're not at cross purposes here. As stated at town meeting and reiterated in emails to the CBRC chair and the moderator, it's our intention to work with the CBRC to figure out what, if any, changes are warranted to the amendments for the special act. Toward that end, I tried to schedule a meeting with Mr. Griesmer, the chair, was unable to do so until it was actually through one of the members I met on Thursday, and I met with Mr. Griesmer on Friday. So as Mr. Griesmer stated earlier, they're amenable to looking at these amendments, and any resident can make a potential suggestion. So here's how I'd like our discussion and deliberation to occur. We're going to review the entirety of Article 25 amendments A through U with no Q. The board will discuss the individual articles alphabetically. Some amendments, such as Amendment A, which does a global replace of town administrator with town manager, we can dispense with fairly quickly, I would hope. I'll ask for public comments on that specific amendment only. I'm not going to allow any comments about the process, only the content of the proposed amendment and possible alternatives. Neither am I going to allow cross-debate between factions. If there are no objections or concerns raised by the public or the board, the select board will take a vote to support that amendment as it is. If there are concerns that come out of the discussion of a particular amendment, we'll note those concerns, pass them on to the CBRC for them to consider in a future meeting, which we now know is December 19th. I've already said that I've met with the chair, and we know what their intention is. My intention is to send a summary of our discussion to the CBRC chair as reviewed by the Select Board, Town Council, and Town Administration. I expect to use this as a first step to having recommendations. Again, we need to get on the same page before we can even think about when to hold the special town meeting. Okay. One last thing. I had a couple questions for town council, and I'll just read those. Those are relatively quicker. Town meeting voted to support amendments A through H, but there were several amendments where town meeting disagreed or it was a very close vote. We as a select board didn't weigh in on any amendments that didn't pertain to either town administration or select board duties. Question 1, given that the special act hasn't been acted upon yet, can these amendments be modified prior to the completion of the rest of the special act? The answer from council is only town meeting can modify the amendments that were voted, and then the process would require rescission of the earlier vote and then a new vote. Question 2, or if A through H cannot be modified, can 100 residents sign a warrant article to modify any of A through H and add that to the special town meeting warrant? Council said for a special town meeting, 100 registered voters can submit a petition to put an article on the warrant, or the others authorized under 211B, elected officials, or a multi-member body acting through a majority of the body. Does anybody have any questions as far as the process? Okay. Let's move on to Amendment A. Does anybody have any questions on Amendment A? No? You guys are all comfortable with town administrator to town manager. So let's take a vote. Let's get rolling here. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. That is a 5-0 affirmative vote. Let's see, where did that paper go? Okay. Amendment B, the topic is to fill town meeting vacancies using an elected official, the moderator, instead of an appointed position, town clerk. It is in section 2.6 of the charter. Are there any comments on this?
I had a question.
Okay.
The only, and this is not an objection to the amendment, the question was with regard to the red line and paragraph 2.6, paragraph C, the last two sentences, or the sentence before the last one. The lists so prepared and maintained shall at all times be subject to the review and approval of the town moderator. I'm not sure what the approval means. Since the town clerk oversees the elections, it's presumed that she would know whether or not those lists were in order.
Okay. So, sorry, I'm just catching up to you. Let me bring that up. Rich, do you have any idea on that?
I can only imagine that the town moderator may have knowledge that the town clerk doesn't have about members of town meeting or members of the town, as the town clerk is an employee and doesn't live in town. And therefore, the town moderator may want to look at the list and say, you know, this person doesn't belong on the list.
And then the town clerk would take that person off the list based on the moderator's knowledge of who might live in town or who has died?
Yeah, or presumably would verify the information. I mean, it's, you know, it seems like with the town clerk being appointed, and I again, I'm only imagining what this means, but it seems like with the town clerk being appointed, the town clerk is doing the clerical operation of maintaining the list, and the town moderator, it's actually the town moderator's list in order to fill vacancies. That's
not a hill I'm going to die on. It's just, I'm not sure about the moderator owning the lists and approving, and because the town clerk oversees, is not doing clerical work. That person is in charge of maintaining electoral records, who has won, who has lost, who has resigned.
I'm just looking at the text, the last sentence, where it says, the town moderator may prepare and maintain such lists in the event of failure of the town clerk to prepare and maintain the same on a timely basis. So it sounds to me as though if the list is out of date, the town moderator has the capability of stepping in and saying, unless I'm reading this wrong, that he has the ability to provide the input.
Yes, he may prepare and maintain.
Right,
I think that's beyond the scope of
okay,
his duties,
okay,
or her duties.
okay. Any comments, further comments? Okay, I understand what you're saying now, so let's flag that as something like, why is this vested in the moderator?
I think it's more the question of, I think review is fine. I think it's the question is about the approval, right, Catherine?
Right,
Approval and maintain, yes. And I understand that this person is now appointed. If there's a subtext that the appointing authority, that the select board somehow has control over the clerk and the voting lists, I think that's pernicious. I'd like to avoid that being the reason for legislation.
okay. Okay. Anyone else?
Mr. Jeanette?
Yep, I know.
Okay.
Anyone else? Public comments? Mr. Janet?
Good evening, all. Nice to see you on this
I know
Tuesday
most of the
evening.
world knows you, but you, for the
Rick
audience at home.
Jennett, Precinct 7, town meeting member. What I'm struggling with here is the responsibilities. There's been discussions and concerns about power of authority, I guess, separation between administration, legislation, et cetera. And what I'm reading here is that the town moderator then would be responsible for appointing town meeting members. And I'm not quite sure why the clerk would not be able to do that. If it was to be collaborative between the two, maybe as a discussion, it probably would be helpful for both parties. It's not clear to me, and again, you folks have addressed it, the list so prepared and maintained shall at all times be subject to review and approval of the town moderator or the moderator's designee. I agree with the question of approval. Again, I think it's a discussion between the two.
Yeah.
If there are issues with individuals that the moderator is aware of, but I think the ultimate choice would be the town clerk's, as it has been right along, whether she is elected or appointed. I know that there were concerns that the executive branch might have ways of, quote-unquote, creating some pressures in order to get certain individuals appointed to town meeting to maybe help their issues as town management. The same could be said for a moderator. So again, I think it's something that I'm questioning, and I want to better understand the powers of the town moderator and the town clerk moving forward. That's one of the reasons that I would look forward to the CBRC meeting.
Okay.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Janet. Hold on, let's go on. Any other comments? Public? Ms. Vickers?
Good evening, Brinley Vickers, Precinct 8, Town Meeting Member. That's a question. Will you be voting individually as we go along?
Yes.
So then the one thing I would like to say first as it brings it up is that I feel it's important when we're looking at all of these to see them collectively for the ones that put more responsibility onto the town moderator. So I think that this one needs to be considered in that same fashion, because there are many now that add a lot more authority and power to the position of the town moderator, and I see that as potentially a problem. I agree with what the previous resident said, and that's my point with this one. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Anyone else? Mr. Sidney?
Yeah, I'm reading from the FinCom book for Amendment B. The first paragraph under the discussion says, Amendment B changes the way vacancies are filled at a town meeting. Since the town clerk is no longer elected, the moderator would be primarily responsible for making town meeting appointments. Mr. Griesmer explained that the idea behind this change is to make sure that an elected official is overseeing the process for appointing people to fill vacant positions in town meeting. That's just a quote from the discussion, from the FinCom discussion, without expressing any opinion on that.
That answers the question I was just about to ask. Was this a function specifically, the shift in responsibility was specifically related to the elected versus the appointed?
So I'm curious about why that's necessary. Unless there's a supposition that the appointing authority has undue influence with the town clerk, who reports to the town manager and presumably has ways to report undue influence, I think that it has this pernicious subtext that it's just not necessary. And I think that this expands the scope of the town moderator's job beyond what is traditionally understood.
Thank you. I'm going to also weigh in on that. I think the town clerk, although it's an appointment of the town manager and is accountable to the town manager, who is in turn accountable to the select board. So if there is any activity that's untoward, we will see it, we will act on it. It would trickle up from the town administration to the select board, and we could act on it. To me, this is such an edge case scenario that I feel that it's unnecessary. So in this case, I'm going to ask for a motion to table a vote on this pending discussions with CBRC.
Move to table discussion and vote on Amendment B. Oh, so sorry.
Oh, thank you. Ms. Walschlager. Yeah, unmute her. Yeah.
Hi, sorry. Linda Walschlager, I'm the Finance Committee Chair. And I just want to apologize in advance. My internet connection is not very stable, so if you can't hear me, if you lose me. I just wanted to add a little something else about this while you're bringing up this with the CBRC, which is that I'm not sure that the language as written compels the moderator to make any appointments, at least in not, it doesn't mention a specific time. So this came up as we thought about it afterwards, and I've actually had a conversation with the moderator about it. But if you look at how it's worded, it says that the moderator shall make these appointments, but it doesn't give a time frame. And it doesn't necessarily compel the moderator to do that. So that's something that I think needs to be looked into about how it's worded in the language to make sure that these appointments are actually made. Thank you.
Okay. Just to try to sum that up, I understand about the time frame and then not compelling. What I also think is that's sort of, what's the right word, complementary to the previous comments about who is responsible for making these appointments. Okay. Did I see anyone else? Okay. Ms. Edelman Foster? Nope. Sorry, that's just art, I think. Pardon me. Okay. We had a motion to table this pending the, sending it over to CBRC.
Who's the seconder?
There wasn't. So
Second.
do I have a second?
Second.
That is moved by Ms. Coughlin, seconded by Ms. Pope. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? I heard 5 voices. Okay. On to, where?
Amendment C.
Amendment C.
Quorum.
Too many pieces of paper. Right, this one concerns adjusting the town meeting quorum to be based on filled seats. It's Section 2-12 of the charter. I received an email from a town meeting member who is unable to make this meeting tonight, who wanted to speak on this matter, so I'll go to that first. It's fairly long, but I'll try to speed read here. We already established that he can't be here. While I agreed with the majority of the changes proposed by the committee and appreciate their work, I want to urge the Select Board not to support reducing the quorum requirement for town meeting, motion C. I was initially supportive of this change, but after learning more and reflecting on it, I have come to strongly oppose it. As you know, town meeting currently requires a quorum of 50% plus 1 of the number of seats in town meeting. Since the number of seats is set by our charter at 180, that means a quorum is 91. Motion C would change it so that a quorum is reached when there are 50% plus 1 of the number of filled seats, so it would remove vacant seats from the calculation. While seemingly innocuous and even appealing, this change is unprecedented as far as we've heard. The CBRC has not identified another legislative body that operates with a floating quorum like that. And this is for good reason. Quorum requirements, while annoying, are an important safeguard to ensure there's sufficient cross-section of the body, and by extension, the public is represented in the meeting. This is especially pernicious in our town meeting, where one precinct, Precinct 1, is already very underrepresented relative to the other precincts. According to the most current data available on the town website, there are 9 vacancies in Precinct 1 and no vacancies in any other precinct. This means under the current system, if 91 people show up to town meeting, all else being equal, you'd expect 4.55 representatives from Precinct 1 to be present. If the quorum were calculated under the new system, it would be 86. With 86 people, you would expect 4.3 representatives from Precinct 1 to be present. While that difference doesn't seem like a lot, it is still a step in the wrong direction for an already unfair system. And of course, would grow worse as more vacancies appear. The appeal of motion C is obvious. Town meeting clearly has a problem with getting a sufficient quorum to operate, as we saw vividly during the debate on this very issue, when a proposal to delete motion C was defeated by only 5 votes. In a vote where the body was lacking a quorum, 86 total members voted. But the solution is not to lower the quorum requirement. It should be to reduce the number of town meeting members, something we can only do through a special act or charter commission. Reducing the number of town meeting members would not only make reaching a quorum easier, but would strengthen the voice of Precinct 1 by lessening the difference in voting representatives between it and all other precincts. The CBRC says it rejected this idea because it would result in losing a lot of good volunteers, but that is factually debatable at best and based on a fundamental misunderstanding of town meeting's purpose. As a factual matter, it isn't clear that reducing the number of members would result in losing a lot of good volunteers, because the whole reason we have this problem in the first place is that many town meeting members do not show up for most or even all nights of town meeting. The CBRC said in front of the Finance Committee and in other forums that it had data showing that different people show up there every night, so there is really a lot of participation, but it has never made that data public. And the experience of this most recent town meeting, where we were regularly close to or below the quorum requirement, undermines this claim. But much more fundamentally, that answer really misunderstands what town meeting is. Town meeting is not a volunteer opportunity. It's a system of government. Its role is not to provide as many opportunities for people to volunteer as possible. Rather, it is to represent everyone in town, including people who don't have the time or the desire to participate in town meeting itself. Having people who want to serve in town meeting but were unable to actually show, I don't know what that is, which would actually show the system is working because it would mean that there are competitive elections where voters who don't serve in town meeting would have a real voice in how our town is governed. And that is from Cody Jacobs, town meeting member, Precinct 2, also a member of the Finance Committee.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
I'd like to request Mr. Marshall upload that letter to Novus for people who would like to read it in its entirety.
Yes, please.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Sidney.
Thank you. Just a couple of things. First of all, this whole question of quorum versus the question of the size of town meeting, I think the whole discussion of the size of town meeting in this context is really irrelevant. It's a separate discussion what the size of town meeting should be. I would like to see us restrict our discussion tonight to specifically the topic of the quorum, which is the subject of the amendment. And on that topic, I sort of want to note that town meeting is the only body in town that has a fixed quorum based on the number of available seats as opposed to the number of filled seats. All other bodies, a quorum is essentially half of the filled seats. Now, the one exception,
Finance Committee.
No, the Finance Committee has a rule about recommendations, but not quorum. So if there are 13 seated on the Finance Committee and there are 2 vacancies, a quorum is 7, and in fact, in that case, the recommendation level is also 7, because that's the way the bylaw is written. It's half of,
No, it's 8, Rich. I don't mean to argue.
Could we
back
ask
and
counsel
forth.
about that? Because I've looked into this a couple of times.
I've had many votes that have been 7-something that did not pass.
But if there are 2 vacancies on, it's a question of vacancies. If there are 2 vacancies, that number drops.
Under the general laws, the quorum is 50% of the board as constituted. So if it's a 7-person board, the quorum is 4. The exception that's commonly seen is the Conservation Commission, where it's 50% plus 1 of the seats filled. But generally, so for the Select Board, the Planning Board, the Zoning Board, it's 50% plus 1 of the board as constituted. I'd have to take a look at the charter or the bylaw off the top of my head. I don't know on Finance Committee, but it's the opposite of what you said, Mr. Sidney.
Okay, thank you. I was not aware of the general law in that case. I do know the Finance Committee does, it's a bylaw, it's in the bylaw, by the way. I think it's 24, might be 25. It does say that the recommendation level is based on the number of filled seats. So, because we had that situation once when I was on the Finance Committee in terms of making recommendations. So, okay, well, I stand corrected on that. Thank you.
So with respect, Mr. Sidney, no other board, even if that were the case, has the power of the purse of the town, approves the budget, or passes bylaws that apply to all people in Natick. So those are exceptions I would make. Of the 37 representative town meetings that exist in the Commonwealth today, or 2 months ago when I looked, no other one has a floating quorum. And so I would say that while you say that the number of town meeting members is irrelevant to this, it is a possible solution to the quorum issue. If we reduce the number of town meeting members to 90, not 9 from each from 10 precincts, that increases the likelihood of underrepresented precincts having representation at town meeting and also solves the quorum problem.
Further discussion?
You had somebody on the public.
Hold on. We'll go to the Zoom land first. Karen, yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Karen Edelman Foster. I'm no longer a town meeting member, alas, but I live in Precinct 6. And tonight I'm speaking only in my own capacity as a resident of Natick, not representing anybody else. So, I mean, this notion of a floating quorum wouldn't be a problem if vacancies were equally distributed over all the precincts, but they're not. Vacancies are, as we just discussed, concentrated in Precinct 1, the population of which the federal government officially considers an environmental justice population by virtue of its being composed of 40% or more of so-called minorities. In any case, Amendment C allows us to stop worrying about vacancies, stop fussing about vacancies in a precinct with a significant minority population. I mean, they already have a smaller voice because for whatever reason, they don't elect as many town meeting members. Now we're also allowing ourselves to pretend they don't exist at all for purposes of a quorum. I think it's a mighty small step, if it's a step at all, from ignoring our EJ communities with regard to quorums to just plain ignoring them. As you know, Natick's town meeting, unlike those of many close-by towns, is representative. Presumably, it's because we think representation is important. So let's not make the price of participation to construct a new system that's even less representative than it is now. Thank you, and sorry for the cold voice.
Thank you, Ms. Edelman Foster. Mr. Oster, there, wait, Rich. Wait till it goes there.
Good evening, Josh Ostroff, town meeting member from Precinct 6 and former member of the Town Governance Study Committee that the Select Board appointed a couple of years ago. I strongly associate myself with the previous speaker and with Mr. Jacobs, who sent the well-stated letter, and I would look at it as, for any amendment, what is the problem that we're seeking to solve? And in this case, if it was a question of, achieving a quorum, well, that's one way to address it. But I'd submit that the larger issue is representative town meeting, where we have, in any given year, most precincts do not have contested elections. In 2023, there was one person who got signatures to be on the ballot. He was elected with 250 or so votes. 3 others were elected with less than 10 votes. And in most other precincts, including mine, it's typically, it is something you can just walk onto. And I don't think that is how democracy should be run. If we're going to have elections, then they ought to be contested, or at least have as many people on the ballot. So I think that is, I was hopeful when I saw the warrant that the CBRC submitted under what was Article 25, that adjusting the size of town meeting was to be considered, and I salute their work. I've said that to them at a meeting, but I am concerned that this was a shortcut that I feel deserves, a stronger voice and an opportunity to solve a couple of problems at once. I don't know what the number is. It could be 120. Obviously, the math works into it. But I think that would help you solve a couple of problems. So that is my concern, why I voted against Amendment C. I know it narrowly passed. There were some creative ways to address it that I think might have just compounded the problem there. But I think that a substitute Amendment C that addresses the size of town meeting, or an Amendment Z or whatever, would be a better way to do it. And that's one of the reasons I was concerned that this passed and is on its way to the legislature, because I think that's a poison pill that could doom the entire thing at the ballot if and when it gets there. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Goff.
Carol Gloff, town meeting member from Precinct 7. So I'm going to be very practical here. I don't need to repeat what others have said. But as I thought about this, and I agree generally with what others have said, please don't misunderstand that. But I thought, okay, so we have a town election the last Tuesday in March. And there's a number of, as is typical these days, there are a number of precincts where there aren't enough candidates on the ballot to fill all of the town meeting seats in that precinct. So then the town clerk and or the moderator need to look at the write-ins and deal with that. Town meeting starts, I think it's now 3 weeks after. I may be wrong about that. It used to be 2 weeks later, but we extended that a little bit. But anyway, so it's a little bit. So there's a lot that goes on after an election, and there's a lot that goes on getting ready for town meeting on the parts of both the town clerk and the town moderator. So they're juggling all these write-ins, and gee, did Carol Gloff get 3 write-ins, or did she only get 2, and that sort of thing. So they may not get to reaching out to, just using myself as one of the write-ins, Carol Gloff, to see if she even wants to be on town meeting by the first night of town meeting. So the first night of town meeting, you have, rather than 180 seats filled, you have 165 seats filled. Okay, so your quorum's going to be 83, right? So, but by the second night of town meeting, now you've reached Carol Gloff, and she has said, yes, she will serve as a town meeting member. Now you have an extra seat filled, or maybe you have 2 extra seats filled. So the point I'm trying to make is you could be adjusting the number of seats that are filled for pretty much every night of town meeting, which could then adjust the need for the quorum. I'm not saying that can't be done on a rolling basis, but to be blunt, it's a bunch of work that somebody's got to take care of, and I just don't think that it's necessarily worth doing. Personally, I like the idea of not having to wait until we get 91 people in the room, because I've, along with many people here, have sat there for a while waiting and calling people saying, can you show up? But I think that the disadvantages outweigh the advantages of this particular amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hoff. Ms. Vickers.
Good evening, Brindley Vickers, Precinct 8, town meeting member. I won't repeat a lot of what everyone else has said. I agree with it. I will say that since tonight we're writing adjustments, you were looking for recommendations and adjustments, I will say right up front, I think this one needs to be deleted and not adjusted. I don't think there's any way to adjust it. I think that speaks to Selectman Sidney's conversation about the number of town meeting members. If that's a different subject, then this needs to be deleted and not adjusted. I believe that this does not require an incentive to fill the empty seats, making it not democratic. It's not in keeping with the fact that we are a representative town meeting as opposed to an open, anyone can come in town meeting. I believe it doesn't fix the problem it's trying to address. We've spoken about that, but we haven't said it out loud. The town meeting, the problem that it's trying to address is participation and efficiency. It means that some people in precincts might say, hey, so that we're equally represented, sign up. You don't have to come. We don't make it accountable for that. We just need to have our seats filled so that we have equal representation. I also believe that we need to look for the future. The charter in this, where we are right now, was created in 1980. So anything that we do right now, we have to think about it that far in the future. If we're thinking about it that far in the future, if we look at some math, without changing the number of seats for town meeting, let's say under this amendment, in the same precincts 8, 9, and 10 only elect 2 members each. Each have 8 empty seats for a total of 24 seats. That means that there are now only 76 total members and 38 to make a quorum. Not saying that will happen, just providing an example of it could happen under this amendment. So Precinct 1 and Precinct 2 still show up with their 20 members, but now only need an additional 18 to make a quorum. Additionally, in this example, the simple majority of the quorum would be 20, and in precinct 1 and 2 create a simple majority. So there would be no incentive by others to fill those empty seats, because these precincts right here would have the ability to pass what they want or change what they want because there's empty seats, and that's how it would work. I just think that this is completely undemocratic, and it would be wonderful if it was deleted. Thank you.
Any other comments? Anything online? I did not see anyone. I'll go to Kristen this time, because I saw her first.
I'll be honest, I don't yet know the answer, but this concerns me. The quorum issue absolutely concerns me, considering the issues that we know we have in the specific precinct with representation, and this seems like that could exacerbate that problem, and then to write it into law seems to me to create a greater issue. One that we should really, it's a separate issue, one that we as a town should be trying to dig deeper into, trying to figure out and get to the bottom of. So I have concerns about this.
Thank you, Ms. Pope. Mr. Sidney.
Yeah, I move we table this and request that the CBRC attempt to identify other ways to increase participation, if possible.
Yeah. Before I accept that motion.
Well, and I have some.
No.
I have some comments that I want to make relative to that. I can hold them. I can hold the motion. No problem. I think Ms. Vickers actually put her finger right on the real problem, which is participation. Mm-hmm. It's not the size of town meeting that's the problem. It's participation in getting elected. It's participation across town, whether it's precinct 1 or other precincts that show up with the same people and no competition. I think that's the problem to solve. Whether it can be done in law or not is another question. But I think that I've come around to this quorum thing is a bad idea. I don't know that changing the size of town meeting is the right answer, but certainly some way of increasing participation is the right answer.
Mr. Chair, may I speak to those comments?
Sure.
I'm not seconding. I'll second. Yes, second to postpone. And speaking to those comments, we live in a democracy and we can't compel participation. We just can't. And as long, I hear, and I've been here 20 years, and I've met so many people for whom town meeting, they recall the halcyon days of full participation, and 50 people sign up for the 4th of July parade. We can't even get a committee for the 4th of July parade, volunteers. That demographic is changing in Natick. And I'm not saying it's for the better, but we have people buying $2 million houses in town, and they're just writing checks for their taxes. They're not interested in serving. I know because I've talked to them in my neighborhood. There are people who are just like, look, I want a well-rounded town, pick up my trash, one thing, my water to be clean, and my schools to be well-run. So we can't, through law, address participation. We can encourage it, we can reach out, we can put together, forums about how one can participate and support the community, but law is not the way you get people to participate and support their town. So I think that the issue that they were trying to solve is the quorum issue, and I would, in seconding this motion, ask them to either resolve that issue in a just way or just, they can't withdraw, it's already gone to the legislature. So I think that's going to take 100 citizens writing a new one or asking to rescind that amendment. But yes, I second the postponement.
Okay. Any other comments? Okay. No. Okay, I just want to say a very quick one. I agree with both of my colleagues on this. It's a participation problem, but it's a further participation problem. We have many town meeting members who selectively participate in town meeting. So they'll show up for the articles that they're interested in, but not necessarily the entirety of town meeting. And I think we have a fundamental challenge to find out why that's the case. Part of it is the longevity of town meeting. When you get 6 nights to not complete a town meeting, that, I bet if you did a graph that they fell off considerably around the 3rd or 4th night because they members saw, where this thing was headed, and so they lost interest. So I think it behooves us to figure out why, and I think there's a lot of good work that the CBRC has done to help make town meeting more efficient. I think we need to continue to do that work. I think that this amendment, though, is for the reasons already stated, is a non-starter in my opinion. Okay, so we need to vote on that. All in favor of tabling this motion and sending our comments over to CBRC, please say aye.
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 Okay, another 5-0-0. All right, on to Amendment D. Okay, which is codify the practice of the Select Board to insert received articles into the town meeting warrant and define multi-member bodies who can submit warrant articles. Section 211 and 7G. Do you have any comments? Do you have something, Rich?
Yeah, just briefly, I'm looking at 7G again. It's an attempt, so one of the things, and I was at one of the CBRC meetings when they were discussing this, one of the things that they were concerned about was that the way multiple member body was originally defined, it could have been a subcommittee, for example, of the FinCom. Would be considered a multiple member body under the original definition. So, I think they did a reasonably good job of trying to clean up so that the multiple member bodies are really the main bodies. But I'm concerned that this particular definition actually excludes committees appointed by the Select Board.
Yes.
And so I would ask, I think the rest of this is fine, personally, but I would want the CBRC to look at this and see if they could add committees appointed by the Select Board, also perhaps committees appointed by the town administrator, although the town administrator can put those warrant articles on for them. That would be my comment.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Sidney. Further comments, Mr. Joseph?
I guess just to clarify, so what I'm hearing is the pre-red line version is what members want, right? I mean, other than
Yes.
eligible, just keep it as is?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I think, I actually, if I
You're
may.
looking for, go ahead.
Yeah, if I may. The changes to 211B, I think, are good.
B is fine. I'm referenced G, I'm sorry, I should have referenced G.
Yeah. I think maybe just adding Select Board bodies into that modification actually makes it better, as opposed to like removing that piece of the amendment completely.
Well, I guess my concern about this, I feel like we're overworking the dough. When we talk about big laws, less is more. My concern is sometime in the future, maybe there's a task force that's appointed by the planning board, or maybe the Board of Health has some real issue. We've got elected representative boards in this town that serve in executive roles that are not the Select Board, and to handcuff them arbitrarily just based on protecting our dominion makes no sense.
Good point.
To me, I feel like we're fixing a problem we don't have. I have presented articles to town meeting as the former chair of the Economic Development Committee, and I will say at those points in time, that EDC was acting, I think, with the input of corporations and individual business owners and had a purview that the board at the time did not have. I think the gravitas in front of town meeting and the relevance of what they brought to that town meeting when we brought those articles was significant. So my attitude is this is unnecessary. To me, it writes out what already exists, and I'm not just saying that as a select board member. I'm saying that out of concern for our peers on the Board of Health, the Planning Board, and other elected bodies. So, thank you.
Good point. Ms. Scott?
Along those lines, I'm curious, I think that writing legislation, writing laws based on something that might happen is really bad practice. And I don't know that, again, we're solving a problem. With reference to Section B, the first sentence that has been amended, the Select Board shall insert in the warrant all petitions which are addressed to it and received by it. So what has been changed is insert in the warrant and received by it. Has it been the case that the Select Board has received warrants petitions and not put them on the warrant? Further, if they don't have the, for example, if they don't have the appropriate number of signatures, are we compelled now to put them on the warrant? If they aren't in a proper form, are we compelled now with this amendment to put them on the warrant? And I have a question for council.
Go right.
So just a point of order, point of clarification. Am I right in understanding that our votes to postpone and send to the CRBC are really more performative in the sense that the A through H has already gone to the legislature, and in order to cure that or incorporate our comments or amend that, we would need to have town meeting rescind what had been sent to the legislature and then propose a change? It has not been sent? Thank you, Mr. Jeanette.
Good evening, Karis, North Town Council. First of all, I actually have a call into the town clerk to talk about the process for submitting the articles to the legislature. I know she's been working on compiling all her town meeting notes and all her amendments. I do not know if they have been sent. I do not believe they have. And I need to check on the status. We hopefully have a meeting tomorrow to talk about it. In any event, the articles have been voted by A through H. Those amendments have been voted by town meeting. So as I said earlier, with respect to the question from the chair, it would take an act of town meeting to change them. And I believe a rescission of that prior vote, regardless of whether they've gone to the legislature or not. It still requires town meeting action.
Yes, Mr. Joseph, for a point of order.
Point of order. So given what council has just said to us, it seems to me that, if we're going through these things preemptively with the anticipation that there might be motivation to go back to town meeting and ask them to reconsider, at which point in time that would be done either at spring town meeting or a special town meeting, depending on how we proceed, at which time a warrant will be posted and these articles will come before us for consideration at that time.
That's correct.
Right. So this whole process is speculating, and we'll have another chance to review all of this all over again in the future.
That was my point when I said this is the first step.
Right.
Right. And this is not the end result. We have to see what comes out of the collaboration with the CBRC. Whether they implement these changes, ignore the changes, we can then do precisely, or 100 residents can sign a warrant article and say, we didn't like Article C, we want that to go. I want a second.
Thank you.
Rich?
Yeah, I want to talk a little bit about 211B. My understanding, and council, correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is this actually causes our charter to conform to what general law requires anyway. It does say later that they have to be valid signatures, so we don't have to put anything on where it doesn't have valid signatures. And we are required by general law to put them in the warrant. So this is just, the 211B stuff is just conformative to general law as opposed to actually any substantive change to what we have to do regardless.
I don't think that's correct.
Ms. North, please.
Karis North Town Council, that is correct with respect to citizens petitions. Any citizens petition that is received and meets the requirement must be put in the warrant. Your charter can direct how you handle other types of articles. There is some split of authority on how much control the select board has over the content of the warrant. The better practice is if they receive petitions or, articles from an eligible individual or body as defined in the charter, then it should go in the warrant. And certainly if directed by the charter, it should.
So just to clarify that would be something like planning board sponsored article, conservation commission sponsored article, et cetera.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Okay, all set? Mr. Hickey, you have a comment?
This is, hi, Michael Hickey, Precinct 9. I think the question for council was obviously more parliamentary and sort of what the actual mechanics, legal mechanics of revisiting or reopening or undoing what may have already been done if it were to come to that. And hopefully there's more of a collaborative way of getting to the right result. But in listening to these sort of what ifs about 100 signatures, that the other thing, what I really haven't heard is, and it seems to me kind of an obvious avenue, not saying tonight, but at some point, if all other efforts perhaps don't pan out, the board, as the chief policy-making agency of the town, can always take a voted position, can always write to the legislature, including our delegation and others in the process, committee chair that would hear or consider, deliberate on any portion of what's already been acted on and submitted directly. And I heard that may have already happened already, whether and when it does. I assume a letter on select board letterhead explaining that if there are material concerns about some component or certain amendments would get the attention of those on Beacon Hill. So I would just encourage you to remember that as an avenue to keep in the back of your pockets as well. Thank you.
Thank you for that reminder, Mr. Hickey. Appreciate it. Mr. Ossoff.
Hi, thanks. Josh Ostroff, Precinct 6. Back to the Amendment D, and specifically on the requirement for the eligible multi-member body. I've served on select board appointed committees that have submitted articles to town meeting and that would not be allowed to do so under if this were became law. And I do have some concerns about that. I'm not sure what problem it is that it's actually trying to solve. I feel that when, if it was the Transportation Advisory Committee or some other committee brings something to town meeting, we're doing so with, color of some authority, having been appointed by the select board, but that doesn't give us the right to do anything more than place it before the body. And it's good practice, smart politics, to go to your appointing authority and say, hey, would you co-sponsor this? And that's happened before, but not always. And there are situations where if that doesn't happen, then maybe it runs out of gas. But that's something that you take into consideration, or the appointing authority may take into consideration. I think it's pretty uncommon that it would do so, and there would not be a subject matter that would be seriously considered. So I wasn't at the CBRC meeting when this was discussed, nor the FinCom hearing where it was discussed. I was at the town meeting session, obviously, and I had concerns and voted against it because of those things. So I would just feel like it's getting into the weeds that is not really productive and not, at the level that I think the charter needs to be. I think I appreciate the intent, but it seems needless, and there are probably other ways to monitor what committees are doing and how well they're doing them. Thanks.
Thank you. Further comment in public? Okay. Do you have any motions?
I wonder if you'd accept a split motion, because personally, I think that the 211B change is reasonable. I don't want, I would like them to reconsider the 7G change.
What's the rest of the board think? I'm good with that. Okay, so that is
so my
made by-
motion is to approve the 211.
Hold on. Regarding the split only, right?
Yeah, no, but the point is that there are two changes in 211B. One of them inserts the word eligible in the third line of under initiation of articles. So it talks about receive instead of insert instead of receive, but then it says any eligible multi-member body, and then it goes on to define it in the next section, in section G.
Right, and I'm saying that I think what I'm saying is if we remove the change in 7G, then the list of eligible bodies remains as it is today, which means any appointed body.
But there's no definition. Eligible is then referenced in section B, but is nowhere defined. So I think I mean, it seems like it's right there in the text.
It seems superfluous, or actually misleading, Yeah, so would you accept a friendly amendment that says eliminate any eligible? To me, that's as is not defined, it's misleading and superfluous, because it doesn't really add anything. Because in 7G, you're going to take that back to where it was and said any appointed.
Yeah, so 211B change is okay except for the word eligible, and reconsider the definition of multi-member body.
Okay. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Scoffin. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry, in discussion before we vote. I mean, are we asking them to reconsider the definition of eligible, or are we asking them to strike that suggested change?
We're asking, I think everything we're asking is for them to look at it.
So we're not giving our suggestions at this point. We're just basically asking them to reconsider without input from us?
Well, they'll take our comments. They're going to listen to this, and we're going to send the comments over that we think that this is a problem. And because there are other boards, right? So
yep.
The tabling stuff is all about having them reconsider.
Yep, that's fine.
That's my understanding of what we're asking them to do.
Yeah.
I understand. I guess it's rather than having them pour through records of conversations, just say, we disagree with the recommended change and think it as is fine. Do we want to just basically be that pointed, or is that too direct?
I think direct is good. Yeah.
I think direct is easier, frankly, for a body to consider. So rather than reconsider, I would say strike the recommended change under G.
Okay.
Keep it as is.
I'll take that as a friendly.
So let me make sure that I'm understanding this. So you're striking 7G and you're removing eligible?
Yep.
And everything else stays in 211B?
The other two minor changes.
Got it. Okay. Anything else? Any other discussion?
Just make sure she's okay with the...
You're good?
Yes.
Okay, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? No. 5-0-0.
Sorry, who seconded that?
I did.
You, Captain.
Okay, Amendment E. Clarify the role of town department heads for participating in town meeting, but not necessarily at every session. That is section 210. Discussion on this one?
I'll start.
Kaufman?
I applaud the effort that went into this, and I think the intent is terrific. My only concern is that the town moderator is compelling attendance as opposed to the town administrator. Now, the town moderator and the town administrator work closely on the agenda for each night. The department heads report to the town manager, town administrator, and I don't think it should be the town moderator who's requiring attendance. What I find interesting and kind of questionable is on the fourth line of section 210, subsection A. At the end of that line, it says, "The town moderator may require such attendance to be in the same manner as attendance by town meeting members." If the town moderator can require attendance by town meeting members, then we don't have quorum problems. So
I think that's actually about, if it's a hybrid meeting, the town meeting members, that's more about hybrid versus in-person.
And we don't have hybrid movies. They're not allowed, are they?
No.
Council? No. Okay.
No, but
So
I think that's what that's about, so.
in any event, my point stands. I think the town manager should establish procedures and requirements concerning remote accessibility, contact, et cetera. The town moderator should not be establishing requirements concerning remote accessibility of, contact for, or participation by town. They should be working together, both the executive and the legislative.
Okay.
I might note there's also a typo in in the proposed motion where they failed to change administrator to manager.
Okay, we can point that out to them. Okay. Any other comments?
Oh, no, it's fixed in the actual motion, so.
Just a PS.
Yep.
It seems to me that one of the underlying themes of this entire process has been the strict separation of powers, and this is an example of a not strict separation of powers.
Where it's desirable not to have a strict separation. Yeah. Okay. Comments from the public? No? Okay. Sadelman Foster.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So what Member Sidney said about this likely being referring to hybrid, I think that's probably the intent, but I think that's precisely why talking about intent in charter language is not desirable, because it's not what it literally says. It's really important that what is meant is what the law literally says. So that's one of the reasons I would encourage you to table this and ask the CVRC to take a second look. I also agree with Member Coughlin that not forcing agency heads to attend every second of town meeting, I mean, that's an absurd waste of time. It's a great idea to end this. But doing this in this way is inappropriate. It gives a volunteer from a different branch of government the power to compel town employees in a way even the select board, which is in the same branch of government, is enjoined from doing. So it's perfectly reasonable for town meeting members to expect to be able to get all the information they need when they need it, but it needs to be done in a way that preserves an appropriate separation of powers. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Foster. Any other discussion? Nothing online?
Move we send our,
No, no one back there. Sorry, I thought I saw a hand.
move we send our comments over to the CVRC table.
Okay, table. That was moved by Rich. Anyone else? I'll second that. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Rich is
And
an aye.
I do want to say, I really applaud this ability to not have everybody show up all the time.
Yeah. Yeah, I think
That should be really clear.
I think we're universally behind the idea, but it's the execution that we have concerns about, so.
Mr. Chair,
Okay.
may I beg,
Mr. Durst?
may I beg a break? Or I don't.
Okay,
if you
let's
wanna
take
keep rolling this.
a 5-minute break here. All right, we're back. As Bill Belichick would say, we're on to Amendment F. Okay. Which is add a clause within the preliminary elections section in the event ranked choice voting is available in the future. Discussion. Mr. Sidney.
Well, I know that I personally hate the idea of preliminary elections because I have seen in the past that qualified candidates have stepped back and not run, have withdrawn their nominations to avoid a preliminary election and the cost to the town. And I think that's a bad thing, and that has happened. I also realize that, we could eliminate preliminary elections, and then potentially somebody would be elected with less than 50% of the vote to, for example, the select board. I think that this is a good balance between getting rid of preliminary elections and finding a way that they can go away sort of automatically if we ever manage to, allow ranked choice voting.
As a state.
At the, with the state, it would presumably, I would expect it to be a local adoption of some sort,
Yeah.
if it ever came from the state. But, and I don't expect that to happen anytime soon. I think this is a reasonable change.
Further comments? Anyone in the room want to chime in? Okay. Mr. Osler?
Josh Ostroff, still Precinct 6. So my only quibble with this, and I did support it, if memory serves, is that there are different kinds of voting methodologies. It may be ranked choice voting, it may be approval voting. There's different kinds of ways in which you could winnow the field. And I know this from my son taught a course on mathematics and democracy and has been kind of playing with this stuff in his spare time when he's not doing other things. So I just feel like we are putting language in the charter that a elections expert might say may be overly prescriptive. There could be a different form of election to to winnow the field, instant runoff type thing. So I would just, this, like other horses, has left the barn. So I don't know that there's much we can do about it at this point. And ranked choice is the most likely thing, but there's just different kinds of things that we could do. So don't really plan to speak more on it because there's other priority items, but.
Good. Thank you, Mr. Osler. Anybody else? Okay, do you have any motions?
Yeah, I move we approve this.
Okay, I have a second. I'll second.
To support.
Support.
Support, really, yeah. It's really support as is, right? As amended. Right. I don't want to say amend and approve the amendment F, or support the amendment F as is. And that was Mr. Sidney, and I seconded. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed or abstained? No? Okay. 0-0. All right, Amendment G. Okay, that is clarify the select board's role to call town agencies within the executive branch, but exempt the moderator and committees appointed by the moderator. Discussion. And that, I'm sorry, I didn't say where that is. That is in section 3(1)F, as in Frank.
Question. Chairman, what would be the reason for the exceptions?
Very good
Do we
question.
know?
Very good question.
I can speak to what I understand from CRBC meetings and the town moderator had concurred that there was a problem in the past, that the moderator had relayed that there had been an issue where a select board member or more would, had pressured him to, this is my understanding, to
That's right.
do a certain action. So that was the reason for the red line, the editing, my understanding.
Yeah, well, that's my understanding as well.
Yeah, if I may.
God, this is a,
Discussion in front of the FinCom. This amendment addresses a change in the town's charter regarding the ability of the select board and town administrator to call or compel certain individuals for consultation. This amendment seeks to clarify that this power should not extend to the moderator or moderator appointees, including members of the Finance Committee or other individuals from the legislative branch of the government. It's actually, it seems like, based on that reading, it's a separation of powers. The select board, as the executive board, can't compel the legislature.
hypothetical question. Can the select board, and this might be a question for you, town council, which is, although by this charter amendment, the select board can't compel people, but it can request people be there. There's nothing that prohibits the select board from requesting that a moderator-appointed committee come before the select board and provide an update. Example of this, Salwin House came before us. That was a town moderator-appointed committee, and they came before us and gave an update recently, maybe 6 weeks ago. Please, thank you.
Karis North Town Council, and I feel like I'm back at town meeting.
It
So-
never stops.
You are.
It's a mini town meeting tonight. The section refers to town officers in the first sentence, and then the savings clause in the last sentence that says, notwithstanding this provision, the select board or town administrator may request consultation, conference, or discussion with any multiple member body or town agency on any matter concerning the administration referenced in this subsection. It does not reference town officers or potentially a body appointed by the town moderator. So it's not clear to me that the select board would still have the ability to even request the moderator for consultation based on this language. Again, the moderator is a town officer specifically listed in the charter, and town officers isn't mentioned in that last sentence.
So, thank you, Ms. North. Do we want to request that get clarified by this CBRC? I would think that would make sense. If we want to keep this amendment, the question is, should we put that in there? Because it's not clear to me either in reading it.
Yeah, I think we need to clarify that. I think the intent is appropriate, the separation of powers is appropriate, but I think that it's, I'm glad to hear what Ms. North said, because I didn't pick that up either. I think clarifying that town officer, I think if we just add town officer in there, it's probably enough, but let's
Probably.
ask the CBRC to look at that.
So, Mr. Sidney, Mr. Chair, I had a question.
Sure, go.
Because I don't recall clearly, was it the case that the pressure from the select board was made in open meeting?
What
No, not,
the discussion here says is, a member asked if this had come up before as a problem. Mr. Griesmer said that the moderator had relayed that these issues have occurred. Frank Foss, town moderator, concurred and noticed that this happened more than once. So apparently, and just, I overheard a story the moderator was telling. Apparently, some member of the select board demanded that he show up and demanded that he take certain actions. He declined, which
Which is within his right, because the select board, as a body, did not call him to come before it.
well, I don't know, but either way, it's the select board. In my opinion, the select board shouldn't be trying to compel the moderator to do anything.
Notwithstanding that, my question is, this change is not going to preclude a rabid select board member from contacting the moderator and trying to get him or her to do X, Y, Z.
Yeah, I don't think you can control that anyway.
that's true.
No, you can't. It's just that
Only
this-
with a rabies shot.
Well, and that's, so
rabid.
So continuing the discussion, that was kind of, I guess, maybe the challenge I was having here was what the select board person doing, it sounded like it was within their power, but was that an abuse of power?
Absolutely.
It
A
was
select
an
board
abuse,
member can't.
definitely an abuse of power.
Okay.
Yeah, and
Outside of a meeting, I'm sure it was not a public meeting, it was.
Well, actually, according to what I overheard, there was a case where there was an attempt in a public meeting to compel the moderator.
It doesn't
Let's
matter.
not speculate.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. It just means that we need to protect Nancy's. Mr. Joseph.
Through you, Mr. Chair, and I'm not sure if it's for council or not. Based on my read of this and what Ms. North had just told us, does the language as proposed in this amendment preclude the convening of the Financial Planning Committee? Because that body is basically defined to include 2 members of the Finance Committee. And that's a strategic body designed to contemplate the financial future of this community in a collaborative format. It does not.
Good.
Because they're appointed by the moderator.
When you look at the last sentence, it talks about it's only excluding the town moderator. It does not exclude in that last sentence any multiple member body, which the Financial Planning Committee would be.
Yeah,
And the Finance Committee is.
yeah.
And it's appointed by the Select Board. It's a committee of the Select Board, not a committee of the moderator. Correct?
But does this preclude the select board from having authority to create a committee that includes representation from Finance Committee?
Well, you can't appoint someone to a committee against their will anyway.
No, but
Right.
to define the composition of a committee, like if we're trying to say, look,
Yep.
we're trying to do 5-year strategic planning, it would behoove us to have representation from the FinCom. We want to define a committee, call it the Financial Planning Committee, since we supposedly have one, and that will include 2 members of FinCom. Based on this, we wouldn't have the authority to even suggest FinCom members participate in that.
Well, again,
Fair.
it doesn't include FinCom members in the, hold on a sec.
Persons appointed by the moderator
Yeah, are not subject to the call of the Select Board or Town Administrator. I'm just getting to that again. But again, can request consultation, conference, or discussion with any multiple member body. So the FinCom is, even though it's appointed by the moderator, it's still a multiple member body. Oh, no, I'm sorry. The definition of multiple member body excludes town meeting committees. Never mind. So it conceivably could if there was pushback.
Yeah.
So
So
could we- I'm
just,
sorry,
well, just to follow up on that, I mean, I've got grave concerns about this because, again, there's an issue of, look, collaboration, there's an issue of compulsion, there's an issue of protocol and etiquette here. I'm really concerned, like I said, we're getting into nitpicking little things here based on either history of something that was completely out of the dominion of whoever asserted it. I think inappropriately. I think the example given by the moderator was factual, but I don't think that select board member was acting within their rights. I think they were, acting beyond the scope of what they should have been doing. So in that particular case, I think the moderator was right. We've also demonstrated you can compel somebody to show up. You can't compel them to talk. Right. I mean, at the end of the day. So none of this town thing works without volunteers coming at it with a shared interest in the town. This all bothers me because we're getting into some nuance here that, frankly, what really gravely concerns me, when I got elected, we were talking override within 2 years. And we haven't convened a financial planning committee meeting, and we're going to need to do some serious long-term forecasting. And I know the administration's working on that, but I'd like to think that the elected bodies will be coming together and supporting and working collaboratively on that. I'm concerned about the wording here preventing that from being a possibility.
Okay. Maybe just a, which, yeah. Okay, Mr. Herky.
Mr. Chair, members, Michael Hickey again. Just taking a step back, there's nothing in the existing charter provision that this Amendment G would seek to modify. I heard discussion about compelling or demanding or pushing, whether it be the moderator or some other town officer, into taking some action or not taking some action. It doesn't do that at all. All it does is make town officers, including the moderator, subject to call, if necessary, for consultation, conference, and discussion. That's it. You can't compel the moderator or the planning board or the Board of Health or when the town clerk was elected. You can't compel them to take action. You can, if it really comes to it, and this is a point I made at town meeting while speaking about this. I sat on this board for 6 years. I didn't know this provision existed at all. I don't know how many of you did. Maybe Mr. Sidney, having sat on CBRC and was aware of some of this, but I didn't, I don't know. Ask yourselves, it would be really tragic if you get to a point as a board and you reach that point of saying, we need to have a consultation with the planning board or with the Board of Health or with the moderator on something. It's really important in the interest of the town. And that elected officer refused to have a discussion with the town's chief executive board. I can't even imagine when that would ever be the case. But the charter isn't written for sort of the everyday. It's written for sort of, in some respects, to deal with the potential of what could be a mini crisis at a town level of an impasse or a total dysfunction between elected officials not communicating with each other or not having any way to say, we need to have a discussion. I mentioned at town meeting, I brought up the COVID example where we were communicating, collaborating, consulting, conferencing, and discussing every day. The select board, school committee, Board of Health, and other elected and appointed bodies. And most importantly, as we were going into town meeting, the moderator, about what we were going to do with the town clerk who was then elected. All that happened seamlessly without having to say, we need to actually pull out charter section so-and-so and call, Madam Clerk or Mr. So-and-so chair to here because he's refusing to be. I can't even imagine it happening. But if it's necessary, nobody, not the moderator or anybody else, should be immune or exempt from discussion with other elected members of town government. And respectfully, as the point Mr. City made, I understand it's compelling, to hear this. We want to respect separation of powers, but another point I made at town meeting, separation of powers doesn't mean immunity from interaction with the other branches of government. I mean, just think about look at Congress, look at Beacon Hill. Governors can call legislators back into session in emergencies. It's checks and balances. There's overlap. There's intentional sort of need for the judiciary, the executive, the administrative, agencies, the legislator. They all check and balance each other. Separation does not mean they exist, as I said, in sort of, goo bubbles that never bump into each other. That's not how government works. Government can't work like that. So please, don't. This is a theme that comes up here, and it comes up in some of the later articles, and it's the theme that's probably most near and dear to me. Is first of all, whether it's intentional or not, is this dilution of executive branch authority. Plain and simple. To me, this town has been well served by having a strong executive board. I had never had anyone come up to me, at least when I served in this board, and said, you know what we need to do? Take away your authority, or give you, to me it was usually, why can't you do more? Why can't you accomplish it? They want us as board members, you as board members, to be able to be even more effective, more dynamic, more impactful. And quite frankly and respectfully, it's the opposite. What's come up through the town governance study and other feedback is that where there's the most room for improvement, frankly, is in the operation of town meeting. And I see that really has sort of been flipped on its head, the whole theme feeding through a lot of these articles. But to kind of bring it back to G, I think it reduces, it puts up walls, it creates barriers, it sort of promotes factions and silos. And that's the last thing that would benefit this town, in my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hickey.
Ms. Edelman Foster had her hand up, but she's dropped it.
Yeah, I did, but Mike has just said it best, so nothing to add. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Rich. Thank you, Karen. Anyone else? Discussion? Let me do another hypothetical. If we eliminated after where it starts, persons appointed by the moderator, the next two sentences, would that solve the problem, or would it just be solving part of the problem?
Bruce, can you repeat that? Excuse me, Chairman Evans, can you repeat that?
Yeah, I was looking to eliminate the two sentences, persons appointed by the moderator are not subject to the call of select board or town administrator. Notwithstanding this provision, the select board or town administrator may request consultation, conference, or discussion with any multiple member body or town agency on any matter concerning the administration referenced in this subsection. Now, to me, the first part says, well, this is what we're entitled to do in broad terms, administrative activity for the purpose of furthering continued coordinated administration of fiscal, prudential, or municipal affairs.
I don't think it solves the problem. I think the problem exists not in the language of the original charter, but in the execution of what the select board chooses not to do.
Okay.
One of the things about the charter is that it should be as general as possible. The more specific it gets, the harder it is to enforce. The original language says, essentially, town officers are subject to the call of the select board for consultation, conference, and discussion on any matter related to their respective offices. So we can call them up. We can say, please come to a meeting. I don't think we can compel them even to show up, frankly.
No.
But I don't see anything wrong with the language that you just gave.
Well, that's why I was reading the original.
Yeah, I don't see anything wrong with that.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
As a person who highly values collaboration, that's important. That's important. I mean, because I guess that's the approach that I see it from. The abuse of power, I mean, is just not okay in any circumstance, but for the sake of cross-collaboration throughout these agencies, throughout, town government, and us working more efficiently with one another as partners, as I see it, is essential. So, I'm not in opposition with you, Rich. I'm just saying I don't see anything wrong with that, with the language that you just gave.
Okay,
Right.
so.
If I may, if I think about, for example, the Conservation Commission, or, the library trustees, which is another elected body, or the Board of Health, another elected body, we can call them for consultation anytime we need to. They don't have to show up. And naming the town moderator here, because somebody has tried to abuse power in the past, probably is trying to adjust the charter and make it more specific than it needs to be. That's really what I'm saying. So I would, and we probably want to hear from the public more, but I would say we won't want to just send this one back.
Okay. And send it back, do you mean revert to the original language of the charter?
Yeah.
Right.
I have a question for council. I wanted to know what your interpretation of shall be subject to the call of the select board or town administrator. Mr. Sidney just referenced that we could call them, but they don't have to show up. Why have this why have a section 3.1F at all, which is interestingly subtitled coordination?
Ironically.
Karis North Town Council. I think that the concept of call is simply a perhaps more old-fashioned word for come work with us, to come see us and consult, confer, or discuss. I don't think that it has any other meaning than what is requested in the next line.
And so in follow-up, if a rogue member of the select board sought to compel an elected town officer or member of a multi-member board to do X, Y, Z, that would not be within his or her scope of...
That's right. This says the select board, so it would have to be a majority of the select board at a meeting.
Thank you.
I'm also reading the first sentence of the proposed change, which is excluding the town moderator. I have a big problem with excluding the town moderator. If we, as a select board, requested that he be available for just reasons, I don't see how he should be excluded. He or she should be excluded. I just don't think that's right. So, what is our motion? To move to refer back and suggest the original language of the charter be maintained. Is that a fair summary?
Move to revert the language.
Okay. Revert to, I'm going to say to April 23rd, 2023 charter language. All right. So that will be moved by Mr. Sidney. Do I have a seconder?
Second.
Okay, thank you. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, another 5-0-0. Okay, we're on Amendment H, which is clarify the advisory role of the Rec and Parks Commission to advise both the Select Board and Town Manager. That is found on, in Charter, Section 3-12.
It's subsection B.
Thank you.
I have no objections to this amendment.
Any other discussion or comments? Members of the public? See, I knew there'd be one that would be okay here. Okay. Okay,
Move to approve?
Move to support.
Move to support?
support. Yep.
Second, Rich's.
Okay, so that was Catherine and Rich. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right.
Who did you give the motion to?
Catherine, motion, you second.
Okay.
And we're on to Amendment I. I had to think for a second. Lost my place in the alphabet here.
And now we're into stuff we hadn't talked about.
There we go. Now we're making progress. Now, provide for the town moderator to appoint a deputy moderator to preside over a town meeting in the absence of the moderator. Okay, discussion.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Joseph.
I intend to abstain from this, frankly. I think this is town meeting deciding how it wants to run itself and how they want their leadership structure as the executive branch. I don't think this is within our purview. I know we represent, and many of you serve on town meeting, so you might have stronger opinions than I, but I personally am going to abstain from this one.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Joseph. Discussion?
Yeah, I think that on this one, I think I agree with Mr. Joseph. The select board should abstain from this.
Okay. Guys?
The Massachusetts General Laws provides for, has provisions for replacing the moderator in the absence of the moderator, and I'm just wondering why we're not using that and coming up with something entirely afresh that may have unintended consequences. When I say we, I mean the town.
Well, I think this is, so in my opinion, I want to check with council. The line here, the deputy moderator shall be appointed for a term not to exceed the remaining term of the moderator. If the moderator, God help him, passes away, his term is over. And then we fall back to MGL and elections. This is about having somebody able to serve as moderator if the moderator has to step away because he's ill for a night or is business travel or is recusing himself because of an article or something. So, I mean, I think that's the intent, and I think it's well enough worded that
I understand that, Mr. Sidney, but Chapter 39, Section 14 provides for precisely that. A vacancy, not a death or a cessation of term.
Could you read the statute?
It's really long.
Okay.
It's really long.
So to summarize, though, it's covered in that statute, and if we could request town council's opinion on that as well, while she's looking for that.
Ms. Engelman Foster.
Yeah, hang on, I'd just like to do a comment. Thank you, Rich. One of the issues that I see is the deputy moderator, when it says deputy moderator shall be appointed for a term not to exceed the remaining term of the moderator. That to me just is completely open-ended. A moderator is a elected position, and to me, the possibility, whether intended or not, of the moderator to pick someone as a anointed successor in the event, you know, it's sort of like who do you notify when you have an accident and you're unconscious, right? To me, it seems like this puts a lot of power in one person versus the ability to use Mass General Law to appoint someone as an interim person. This to me just codifies, what if it happened in year one of a 3-year term, right? This appointment could last at least 2 years. So, I don't know, I have an issue with that. So, I would like to see that they consider the approach suggested by Ms. Coughlin, to use Mass General laws, since this is already covered in Mass General laws, and I don't see the need to create a new something in that order.
I just want to raise an unintended consequence. In Massachusetts, one of the biggest complaints about the House of Representatives is that they commonly handpick their successor. So 6 months before the end of their term, or 4 months before the end of the term, they resign, but have given notice to someone and said, set yourself up, get your website ready, start your fundraising, I'm stepping down. And somebody takes off on the runway or is appointed by the governor, is appointed, and all of a sudden they are on the ballot as an incumbent. So what if we had a moderator, and certainly not this moderator, but he's already said he's not going to run in 2025, so we need to think about who's going to be there in 2026. And decide he's going to appoint a deputy moderator and then resign within a certain period of time such that there won't be an election and the deputy moderator could just finish out the person's term
Yeah, that's a great
and
point.
be the incumbent.
Yeah, I hadn't considered that. That is an excellent point. Okay.
Question.
Hang on 1 second. Okay. I'll just finish that up there. Ms. Pope?
Oh, and I don't want to back and forth semantics, but would that still apply if this says the deputy moderator shall be appointed for a term not to exceed the remaining term of the moderator? Would this still stand in that scenario?
Yeah, because from what I understood from Ms. Coughlin, the moderator could appoint someone on an interim basis, and that person would be listed as an incumbent, or could, what we're looking at here is, rogue behavior that could take advantage of something like this. And we're trying to head this off. So I'm going to go to the public because there's a lot of people with their hands raised.
Did Karis want to say something?
Karis, do you?
Let's hear from council.
Can I make what I think is a clarifying comment?
I would welcome it with open arms.
Karis, North Town Council. I just want to be clear. The town moderator's appointment is only to appoint a deputy moderator. The town moderator's appointment doesn't make that person automatically become the moderator. So this person doesn't become the incumbent because that's an elected position.
Okay,
Right.
thank you.
So I just want to be clear about that. And yes, there is a process in Chapter 39, Section 14, that requires an election if a vacancy, if there's a vacancy and you have to have a short-term moderator, then it becomes, hold on, let me just see here, the clerk. And in the absence of a clerk, the chair of the selectmen, the senior member present, and failing that, the justice of the peace.
I sure hope the town clerk is amenable if this ever happens. Mr. Gillenwater, please.
Good evening, Todd Gillenwater, Precinct 5, a member of the FinCom. One of the precipitating issues that got the CBRC involved in this is the change of the clerk to an elected position, or from an elected position, and the definition of the clerk's job specifically excludes allowing them to serve as the temporary moderator. We've seen several times during my tenure on town meeting, we've had the then elected town clerk have to step in for the town moderator. Recusal, alien abduction on the way to town meeting, all sorts of things could involve that. So one of the things is, how do, on relatively short notice, we get somebody to run the meeting, even run the meeting to the extent of having the body elect a moderator. Now, the chair of the select board can step in and do that, and if that's the direction we want to go, I think that maybe that's
suggest that alternative. But the inability of the clerk to continue that function is one of the things that set the CBRC off looking for a replacement. Another thing that came up during FinCom meetings is moderator is what is well beyond what we kind of see happen on the stage. There's a lot that happens. There's a lot of institutional knowledge, legal knowledge, just how things get pulled together, who do you coordinate and things with that. So there's a certain amount of training, or if there was a detailed manual that might be useful, but there's a certain amount of training that it would be useful for whoever was going to have to, on very short notice, step in as an interim. How does that happen in advance? Okay. So I'm not necessarily advocating one. I supported this at town meeting, but there may be other ways of doing that. But that's something that maybe everybody wants to consider. Of that was one of the drivers that said, well, maybe this deputy thing's a good idea. Mm-hmm. So just that input.
That was very helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, that was extremely helpful, because again, I think when we talked about when we moved town clerk from an elected position to an appointed position, we were talking precisely about that, about the experience and skill set to do this. And the more I read this, that it's a finite term, that coupled with what town council said about it not being, them not being a perceived incumbent or listed on the ballot as an incumbent, lets me feel more comfortable with this.
You got Ms. Edelman Foster and Ms. Vickers.
Yeah, Ms. Vickers first.
Me? Thank you, Mr. Chair.
No.
I would point out that, did you call on me? I'm sorry.
No, go right ahead, Ms. Foster.
Thank you. So the temporary standing in for the moderator on a single meeting is not the only job listed in this. The moderator may also direct the deputy moderator to assist the moderator in performance of the moderator's duties and responsibilities. So we're not talking about just, I have a bad cold, so someone needs to stand in, or I have an interest in this vote, so, someone needs to run the vote. It's something more. And I would say that establishing a deputy town moderator position is a good idea. Having the town moderator appoint that person, I don't think is. Town meeting is an incredibly powerful body in town. And the town moderator, arguably, because the town moderator has really power over town meeting, is arguably the most powerful person in town. And giving the most powerful person in town the ability to appoint his or her own deputy and potential successor, and that person not being subject to open meeting law, I must say, is a mistake. However much we might trust the judgment of our current town moderator, it's just not good law to have one person be able to appoint their deputy, who then, because it's such a technical, complicated and kind of daunting job, although that person would not be, listed as an incumbent, there would be power of incumbency in that. I think, you turn on HBO, everyone wants to appoint their own successor. That's sort of the sort of point of so much, but it doesn't mean it's good for the actual town. It would discourage other people from running, it would limit voter choice, and it would be less transparent than having the voters choose, because again, the moderator is not subject to open meeting law. So that choice could be made with no public rationale whatsoever. I might suggest that a simple fix would be allowing the town clerk to run town meeting in the moderator's absence. I'm sure there are others. I don't want to get into the business tonight of thinking of solutions, but just marking this out as something that I think is quite problematic. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Edelman. Foster. Vickers.
Thank you, Brinley Vickers, Precinct 8, Town Meeting Member. In addition to some of the things the previous speaker brought up, what concerns me about this, which if I remember correctly, we did actually get to this part in town meeting. I don't know why it didn't end up being included, but I asked the same question then. It's the open-endedness of this, that apparently there are no restrictions for who they can appoint for their deputy. The person doesn't have to be a resident, doesn't have to be a registered voter, it doesn't have to have had any prior experience. My understanding when I started asking questions was that perhaps the moderator, the current moderator, would want to ask a friend who's a town moderator in another town. I can see that being a viable option, but I think that's the type of thing that should be included in this, that who they appoint needs to have at least the same restrictions as the town moderator. In other words, somebody from outside of town can't come be our town moderator, but there's no restriction in the appointment, and I find that to be problematic.
Thank you. Ms. Goff?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Carol Gloff, town meeting member from Precinct 7. A little history. In 2007, there was an election for town moderator. I believe that's the right year. I look over here. And it turned out that after a recount, the vote was tied between the incumbent and the challenger. And at the time, the charter was written such that the select board had to vote and decide who was going to be the moderator. And the select board, as a group of 5, I was on that board, voted to make the challenger the town moderator. Some folks at town meeting were uncomfortable with that, and so subsequently the charter was changed, or it's the charter of the bylaws, I haven't checked, but so that now if that were to happen, the town meeting would be choosing who should be the moderator, not the select board. So as I sit and think about this, I think, okay, so if we were in that situation, town meeting would need to meet and choose who's going to be town moderator. So why don't we have town meeting be electing the deputy? So, thank you. And yes, I'm old.
So then, excuse me.
Rick Jennett, Precinct 7. Once again, I am old, and I can't remember why we felt that the town clerk could not maintain that responsibility of being the deputy town moderator. Does anybody have any?
Mr. Gillenwater, can you shed some light?
Switch places. Well, I remember the conversations as they came up in FinCom when we asked questions along a similar line, and I know that it's not necessarily a comforting thought, but the discussion revolved around undue influence. The fact that the separation of powers continues to be brought up, and although it might be uncomfortable to think about, that was a major reason given, at least recently, for why that should not be happening, because an appointee of the town administrator running town meeting was thought to be the potential for undue influence in getting town administration activity endorsed by town meeting, getting their agenda through. Now, I don't know that anybody suggests that the incumbents in the various offices now would engage in something like that, but you know, if you look around, it's not unreasonable to think that, well, you see that sort of thing happen, so the potential took over the conversation, and that's one of the reasons that the clerk, as an appointee, was specifically excluded from legislative action, running town meeting. Agree, don't agree, but that was some of the background, at least as it was explained fairly recently during the discussions at FinCom.
Thank you, Mr. Goldwater.
Thank you very much. As I listen to that, again, we keep coming back to separation of powers with most of these amendments that we've been discussing since this evening anyway. Ms. Gloff had a valid point. I mean, separation of power, that means that the moderator can then control the next moderator, et cetera. We've already had that discussion. And my point would be that, at the very least, allow town meeting to make that decision, if we could actually get a quorum. Sorry, that was just an offhanded joke. But I do believe that that might be a more effective way, and I think that hopefully CBRC might want to consider that as a change to this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, Ms. Edelman Foster still has her hand up. I don't know if she intends to. Nope, it's gone.
No, it's gone. Okay. Anyone else have a comment? That I saw a hand.
I have a question.
Could I just make one comment? To me, hearing all this discussion, I agree on the separation of powers issue, but I concur that town meeting should be the appointing authority. To me, it's just shifting the appointing authority from the select board or to the town administrator or manager to the town moderator. And to me, that's an equivalent. It's just one's the executive branch and the other's the legislative branch. To me, letting town meeting weigh in on this is the way to go, because then you don't have the issue that a moderator could put a person in place that they favor moving forward. And I just think that town meeting has the right and the responsibility to make that decision.
Kristen had a question.
Thank you.
I know we're not coming up with, I think, solutions for this, but it honestly, in listening to the back and forth, it sounds like potentially this needs to be an elected role. The deputy moderator.
I think it has to be an appointment made, in my opinion, by town meeting, and you know, if God forbid something happened that's a permanent problem, then there would have to be an election. Right? Mm-hmm. There'd have to be a special election to fill that town moderator seat. But to me, this is you know, hopefully we never have to use this type of thing. But if there's 6 months, let's say, left on the current moderator's term and they're unable to, for whatever reason, serve it out, you know, I would say this takes us through the next available election. And it may be that the next available election is a normal election, or it could be a special election. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I think it's 2 stages. It's one that's the immediate interim appointment, and the second is the longer term election.
So I have a question going back to general law. So Karis may need to answer this. So if we don't have this provision, and the town clerk is not allowed to run town meeting for whatever reason, my understanding, listening to general law, is if the moderator has to step down, under that general law, which is Chapter 39, wherever it is,
14.
it would be, since the town clerk can't serve, it would be the chair of the board who would run the meeting to, at the very least, appoint a moderator. If it's for one article, presumably the chair of the board would just run the meeting for that one article. Is that accurate? I think, Karis, I need you to come back to me with that.
Understood.
Good question.
Karis, North Town Council, and I'm going to answer your question in a couple of ways. With reference to the charter that a prior member spoke of, if you look at section 3.1, G1, filling of vacancies, there is the section that specifically talks about failure to elect or a vacancy in the office of town moderator. Then town meeting fills that at the next session, and until that vacancy is filled or until the next town election, the town clerk serves as the temporary presiding officer. So that's already in the charter, and that has not been proposed to be changed.
Except that in the charter, on the town clerk section, which I think is in Charter 6,
yeah,
the town clerk is explicitly not allowed to run town meeting, which would put it, as I understand it, well, I was just, that's what I was hearing, so I'm just double checking.
I don't see anything in 6. It's 6-5. In B, powers and duties, the last sentence says, "The town clerk shall have all other powers and duties which are given to town clerks by general laws, and the town clerk shall have additional powers and duties as are provided by charter, by bylaw, or by other town meeting vote, or by the town manager."
All right, then we don't have a problem that I was concerned about. All right, because what I was going for is if the town clerk, just to explain my thinking, if the town clerk is unable to serve in the role and would naturally be up there anyway, and the chair of the board, we're back into that separation of powers issue that we were already in. That's what I was concerned about. And, I'm not saying we need 3-10 or not. I mean, I'm not talking about that. I'm really just talking about what happens if it's, how does it work if it's not there? So, thank you for that, for letting me kind of wander a little.
That's a good question. Okay. So, what do we want to do with this one? In my view, and I'll put mine out there, is we should request that CBRC consider having town meeting be the appointing authority here.
I'll second that motion.
Okay. And that is me and Mr. Sidney. Any discussion?
Nope.
Okay. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay.
Abstain.
Oh, yeah, I'm
401.
sorry. Yep, thank you, Paul.
401.
Yep. Okay. You're on to J. which codifies the executive powers of the Select Board as the policymaking body of the town, with decision-making over parks, roads, water, sewer, police, fire, finance.
Mr. Chairman, the only important statement in this whole, in my opinion, the only important statement in this whole, the only important change in this whole amendment is the removal of the last sentence. Everything else, the Select Board shall have all of the executive powers that is possible for Select Board to have. We don't have to get more detailed than that.
Yep.
In terms of the rest of these changes are all just delineating what all those powers are.
Any other discussion?
Well, I guess, so are you saying this, the language delineating those powers is unnecessary?
I think so.
I tend to agree. My concern is what's missing from this, and that's always the.
Yeah, if you just
we have all
eliminate
powers.
that-
We have all powers. Period.
Yeah, we have all powers. That last sentence that they proposed to delete is actually, in my opinion, problematic for us today.
Agreed.
And we ignore it, but, historically, I can understand historically why it's there, but I think we need to get rid of it. And as far as I'm concerned, that's the only necessary change in there.
Okay. I understand what you're saying. Is you accept what their proposed amendment is, save for that last sentence?
No, I propose that the only change that's necessary in this entire amendment is the deletion of the last sentence.
Okay, I had that backwards in my mind. Okay. Any discussion? Hickey.
Was there a second in that? Was that a motion or was that just a proposal?
We're still discussing.
Mr. Chair, members, Michael Hickey again. I would urge you to kind of slow down and walk through this proposal. I think this is one of the most deeply concerning of the amendments, in my opinion. This is probably the best example, or the most concerning example of what I see to be, again, intentional or unintentional, dilution of executive board authority and purview that has served the town well, and again, intentionally or unintentionally sort of dressed up as nothing to see here, technical changes, just clarifying stuff. That is not the case. The first paragraph where there's changes proposed, beginning with the Select Board shall have all the executive powers it is possible for a Select Board to have and to exercise. The Select Board shall serve as chief. Now we start getting into changes. Town policy-making agency, inserting responsible for making policies for the administration of the fiscal, prudential, and municipal affairs of the executive branch of the town. And it was suggested, I believe, there was something left on the table at town meeting with reference to section 1.3 of the charter, I believe intended to illustrate there was sort of parallel language. They're not parallel. The 1.3 of the charter states that the administration of all fiscal, prudential, and municipal affairs of the town shall be vested in an executive branch headed by the Select Board. The Select Board is the executive board of the town, not the executive board of the executive. It's redundant and confusing. There needs to be an entity that ultimately is the chief policy-making entity of the town. That's how we've been well served since this charter was put into effect. Creating this sort of narrower purview of only purview over the executive branch and everything else that doesn't exist, the Select Board can't have an opinion on it, can't engage on it, almost suggested jumping down. There's so many layers of questions about the inserts about, in existing languages. And again, we're supposed to be getting in the weeds here. This isn't great TV, but that's what we're supposed to be doing, right? So the paragraph starting, provided, however, nothing in this section shall be construed to authorize any member of the Select Board nor a majority of them to become involved. They've inserted either in, continues in the day-to-day administration of any town agency, or in the policy direction. First of all, stopping there, what is policy direction? I don't think that's a defined term. We know what policies are. I don't know what policy direction is of other elected boards or committees. So now our chief executive board can't get involved in policy direction? I mean, think of a major policy decision like a school closure or something that involves the Board of Health that we've been invited. I'm sure you've been invited to participate, at least engage and express an opinion. What is this? You can't become involved. 37,000 people in town can become involved in policy direction of, say, the school committee or another elected board, except the 5 members of the town's executive board? Like, what are we trying to accomplish there? It really doesn't make sense. Taking apart the language even more, there are entities here listed that are, I guess, again, kind of doubling back on this policy direction language, can't get involved in policy direction of, say, the Zoning Board of Appeals, a board that I served on for a decade. Ms. Coughlin served on the Zoning Board of Appeals. What is the policy direction of the Zoning Board of Appeals? I don't think the Zoning Board of Appeals has a policy direction. They're a quasi-judicial board that's required to apply the law to the facts of a given case and be independent, generally speaking, of its appointing authority and other boards, including the planning board, including other boards. Really, the only thing that I can possibly think of that this may have been intended to get at is where the board is acting as the appointing authority and may, in that context, I think legitimately ask questions about how the Zoning Board of Appeals behaves, what their current perspective is on sort of their purview or their ability to influence decisions, and sort of, glean in terms of qualifications and perspective and philosophy of law and government and things that fall under the purview of a Zoning Board of Appeals applicant. But beyond that, I mean, and that's a stretch because they really they're not a policy-making board. So I'm not even sure what that's intended to solve. But it would seem to kind of create this exemption or sort of an expectation of a muzzle on the select board from getting involved in policy directions of other elected boards that really, as a member of the world, let alone a resident of this community, you should have the ability to engage upon or engage in. So, I mean, to me, really kind of take a hard look and scrutinize this, because it's not just clarifying stuff. That's really not what this is. And if that was the intent, I think that there was a big miss on that. Kind of stepping back to the second big paragraph, the select board shall be responsible for the issuance of policy directions. These are, for the most part, existing language in conjunction with other elected town officers. Interestingly, when thinking back to our discussion of G, Amendment G, where we want to limit the ability to consult with or have a discussion or a consultation with the moderator, this provision still sort of provides the select board is going to be responsible for policy directives in conjunction with other elected town officers, including moderator, planning board, any elected town officer, not those under its purview. They didn't change that, but they only added something in the end that says, with respect to executive branch of town agencies. So now the board has to consult with the moderator on town policies only with respect to town executive branch authority, but yet can't consult with the moderator in other. It's just introducing ambiguity and silos and vagueness where there was none. It's introducing gray where it was black and white. I don't think this is an improvement. This is a step back, and it's just respectfully to Ms. North, who I love, just going to create lots more hours for attorneys to go, what the hell does this mean, respectfully. So please, take a hard look at this, because this impacts all of you, and we rely on the strength and the clarity of this board to act as the chief policy-making agency of the town. Thanks.
If I may, Mr. Hickey?
Okay, no.
I just want to ask.
No. Please.
Okay.
Josh Ostroff, Precinct 6, town meeting member, like Attorney Hickey, former select board member, and what I associate myself with his remarks, I'd also say that there are times, in fact, it's frequently the case, where the select board needs to exercise leadership. And I look back at the pandemic, where the school committee and the Board of Health and the select board and their associated staff were convened by the chair, Mr. Hickey at the time, in ways that I think would have run afoul of this charter if we adopted it. I think that there are appropriate constraints, because I think that folks can get elected, and I'm sure I've been guilty of this myself, thinking that maybe because the voters put you in office, you have more authority than you actually do. And I think it's important for the charter to clarify what that is. But this kneecaps us, or you, or whoever your successors may be. Town government, I think, is inherently diffuse. It's inherently collaborative, or should be, and inviting many people to process. The bar to entry in town government is relatively low. You just need to be persuasive or a subject matter expert, and you have access to the legislative branch. And as many of us have experienced, you can be an executive branch, but it's 5 folks working together, or 3 in some communities, and that and decisions have to be made in public. And if it's not lawful, of course it gets slapped down, and that's why you need, to make sure that your decisions are vetted by council. But I really feel like this is adding layers of granularity that really constrain the board's authority, and I would go back to leadership, ability to bring people together to effectively govern the community. So and I introduced the amendment that really kind of tried to pull things back. And it was not debated. I think we'd still be in town meeting if amendments J, K, et cetera, that I redlined were here. So I'm hopeful that this will be. I think virtually all of it could be. I mean, there's always room to improve language, but I think the intent of this is contrary to the public interest. So, thanks.
Following up, and then I'll come to you, Mr. Sidney. Following up on that point, one of the earlier comments was that the CBRC is meeting on the 19th to discuss the amendments that were proposed but not reviewed by town meeting. And I would submit that we should, well, I'll wait till we talk about motions for that comment. Sidney?
Yeah, so, I mean, I would notwithstanding the amendment that Mr. Ostroff put forward in conjunction with some other people, I would submit that we could eliminate this entire amendment except for the deletion of that last sentence, which is actually power limiting in our current charter. So we don't need any of these changes except for that one. And if that's all we did was eliminate that last sentence, I think we'd be fine. We could avoid all the rest of the discussion.
I agree with what you're saying if we talk about 3.2b, but in 3.2c, I actually think it clarifies what's required for us to appoint a town manager for a term longer than 3 years.
That's a different...
It's a different amendment.
It's a different amendment.
Got it. Okay. Jumping the gun here, sorry.
So
it all looked underlined and redlined to me, so.
Yeah, I'm
okay, sorry.
Yeah, I'm looking at different documents.
All right, thank you.
So did you make that as a motion, or?
Yes, I would
please.
say, yeah, my motion would be eliminate recommend the CBRC eliminate the entire change except for the deletion of the last sentence of 3.2b.
Do you want to second that, Paul? Or?
Sure.
Yep, go right
Before we
ahead.
move on this, because there's 2 different versions. Can you please read that statement? Read the statement you're speaking about.
So the statement that I think we need to eliminate, the current charter, it's in the current charter, it says, "It is the intention of this provision that the Select Board shall act only through the adoption of broad policy guidelines which are to be implemented by officers and employees appointed by or under its authority." That's actually limiting to our power because it says essentially we can only give the administration guidelines. It actually hurts our ability to set policy for the administration.
Okay. You all set? Chris?
So,
Okay, so all but the last sentence, is that what you said?
recommend eliminate the entire amendment except for the deletion of the last sentence.
Thank you. And
In the first paragraph.
any further discussion? Okay, all in favor, please say aye.
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 So that was me, and who seconded?
I was there,
Paul.
Paul. Yep. Okay. I was like okay and K at the same time. Okay, that is change the procedure to remove or suspend a town manager. Requires the special act process, so you don't need that. Okay. Any discussion?
Let me catch up, please.
Yep. Section 4.4 in the charter.
Yeah.
Okay. Let me, Ms. Coughlin, go right ahead with your
Okay,
comments.
I'm caught up.
You
Thank
are?
you.
Ms. Coughlin?
I would pose the same question that I posed at an earlier CRBC meeting. Why don't we have the same provision that their town council, a 10-term select board member in Sherborne has for their town administrator? And that is, it's in his contract. He'll be subject to termination pursuant to his contract. That was the question I had.
Okay. Further discussion?
Yeah, the only thing that concerns me about the current charter here, and I'm specifically talking about the current charter, the current charter requires that all 5 members of the board be present to vote in this kind of a disciplinary action. That means if one member disagrees, he gets up and leaves, and the vote can't even happen.
Mr. Sidney, that's been brought up a number of times, and since we have 5, 6 former select board members, would any of them care to speak to whether that ever happened in a term?
Yeah, I mean, I know it's never happened.
So, well, that's not what we've been told. We've been told that that indeed has happened, and that's the reason for this provision.
No, this, not in this one. They never said that this has ever happened. They know it hasn't happened.
No, this is
That is not what was communicated to me. It was very clearly communicated to me that a select board member in a meeting regarding termination or discipline of a town administrator, one member did not want to vote and got up and left the meeting every single time. That has been, Bruce, you're familiar with this.
That's what I've heard also.
So I'm just curious if anybody else has a,
Century did this happen?
in what, in our lifetime.
Oh, you've got literally.
Mike.
You do have people who have been here probably the last 15 years. I can stay in my 6. No, never happened. Not a single time.
Yes, if the old people could approach the podium.
The council, the elder.
And say get
Older.
off of my lawn.
We'll do it in age order, please.
I'm the oldest.
Okay.
I am the one who was elected first out of all of us. In my 9 years, it did not happen.
Thank you. We're getting, no,
Yes,
we're
Mr.
getting head
Jeanette.
nods from everybody, all the former select board
Yeah,
members.
and
Point of order, though.
Foster has a-
Ms. Edelman Foster?
Thank you. Yeah, I had heard this rumor too, and that it was specifically about when I was chair. And I can say that it never happened. I don't even know what it was in reference to. This rumor was completely false. Thank you for asking.
Okay, so if I look at what the changes are in this, pretty much,
Mr. Chairman.
sorry, Ms. North.
Ms. Coughlin asked a question that I might be able to answer.
You're welcome to be here.
Thank you. I will.
Is there any reason you're not at the table? This is killing me.
I have a big voice. I don't need a mic. Karis, Northtown Council. Ms. Coughlin asked a question that I think I can answer. With respect to why this is in the charter and not in the town administrator's contract, I believe that Natick had a charter before there were contracts for the town administrator. That's why it came first.
Thank you, Ms. North.
That makes sense.
I was hoping you would elaborate on this rumor of select board members getting up and walking out of a room. No? Okay. So while I'm sympathetic to the idea that something like this may happen in the future, we don't write legislation based on what might happen in the future.
Speculative,
It's not helpful. And so my argument against this is, if we're going to terminate a town administrator, I would like all 5 members to be available, hybrid or in person, with their name attached to a vote. That's public record. We're elected to make difficult decisions, and the minute we start allowing for, well, we'll let 4 people or 3 people, and then it's like, well, I wasn't on that vote. And this is probably one of the most important votes that we would ever take. And I would like to know that we'd be held accountable. And it does provide, I think one of the subsequent revisions provides that that all select board members have a reasonable opportunity to be present.
Right.
So I do think that, you know, noticing it, having it on a public agenda, and Bob Smith doesn't show up, that's noted. So we can't take a vote on this very important issue because Bob Smith didn't show up. Let's have executive session tomorrow, or in 48 hours. Let's notice that. Oh, Bob Smith didn't show up again. I'd like to see that we're held accountable, and that's my argument against.
Yeah, and I agree with that, because I think, you know, when we're going back to the unintended consequences of this, I could very well see, you know, if I favor the town administrator and no one else does, I'm going to make myself scarce for any time there's even a whiff of a vote to remove or suspend that town administrator. So to me, this, again, is just, it's an edge case that has never happened in recent memory, and I just don't see the need to put that, to codify that.
I would just add on that that's well within your right to walk out of the room when there's a vote, and then I would take that opportunity to shame you.
Yeah? Thank you for that. I need to be shamed now and again. Mr. Joseph?
At the risk of taking a contrarian view to this, I actually don't have a problem with this change for the very reasons we're all talking about. Has it happened? Does it matter? We're living in a time right now where a handful of people are holding a huge system hostage. I'm speaking of Washington, D.C., of course. And so my point is, in this particular case, shaming's great, but if we have to move on from a town administrator and waiting for an election cycle to have that happen, that might not be practical. And if a reasonable amount of time is given there, that's challengeable legally. If the individual felt like there wasn't a reasonable enough time, I actually think this gives some latitude there to prevent that individual from acting that way. And frankly, I'm not too optimistic this world isn't moving in that direction over the next couple of years, even further than it has. So I actually kind of like this language, but I'm not an attorney. And I do respect what you're saying. I would definitely shame the person too. We're hired to do a job. Do your job. But that said, if we're crippled and we have to take action on a town administrator that's doing harm,
Yeah.
we can't afford to wait that.
To that view.
And that's exactly my point.
Yeah. I'm coming around to that view because I think it is appropriate, and it's a mechanism to kind of allow us to, with adequate notice, get 5 people to the meeting, because in my mind, I would hope that any chair wouldn't call a meeting knowing that someone couldn't meet. I would go out of my way to reschedule that so that all members could be present and weigh in on that. So I'm moving towards that position. I had reservations initially, but I understand what you're saying also.
Yeah. I mean, the risk, frankly, it puts a lot of power on the board chair that could actually put this on an agenda. Again, this is where I trust colleagues at that point to weigh in with their chair, and hopefully the process works.
Yeah.
But is it plausible? Is it possible? Yeah.
Yeah.
If I may, my concern is, the tyranny of the minority.
Right.
And the way the current charter is written, if we have to discipline a town administrator, which hopefully we never have to do, but if we do, and one person doesn't want to just do that discipline, they can hold up, we could have somebody doing harm to the town because one person decides they're not going to show up to help us vote. They could show up and vote against it. But if they don't show up and we can't vote, we can't take action. And we need to be able to take action.
Yeah.
And that's really, it's the tyranny of the minority that the current charter enables that concerns me, not the realistic, everybody's going to show up and put their name on the record.
All right. In the interest of moving ahead, I think we are in agreement that this is the way we want to go. Is that true? I'm sorry, Mr. Osler.
Thank you, Chair and board members. I'm actually want to speak on the striking of the provision at the very end. This text is removed, which is notwithstanding any provision of the charter to the contrary, no performance review of the town manager by a select board, and no defect or omission by a select board in the performance review of the town manager shall constitute an impediment or barrier to removal or suspension under this section. My concern there is that I think it lets the board off the hook for its due diligence in its most important role of managing and evaluating the town administrator through a defined process. And having seen cases where board members or boards didn't necessarily, fulfill that and then took action, which left the town, I'm not speaking of, subject to significant penalties, and a black mark against the town for, not being able to recruit in the future. Because, there's qualified people who will stay away from towns that mistreat their administrators. So I think that I am concerned about that. I'm glad to hear if there are, people more conversant in this that have, a view of why it's okay to strike that. But I feel like you can't give the, I wouldn't limit the potential future pool of candidates because they feel like they can be sacked, never evaluated, and then terminated because there really needs to be a cause. So I don't have a quarrel with the issue of being present. I would just say that sometimes the tables are turned, sometimes it is, a majority that wants to act justly, and one person says, no, I will stop this process. So things are not always as they seem. I've just from my experience, working with boards and administrators, I see a lot of crazy stuff. So, but I'd be more concerned about the last provision.
No. Thank you. Ms. North?
Karis North Town Council, just to clarify, provision F is being added, not stricken. And yes, I agree with the previous speaker that it is actually important.
Sorry, through you, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
If I may, just to clarify, I guess maybe I'm misinterpreting it. I read the addition of F as a hypothetical scenario. Say the town administrator's performance reviews up until the point of a disciplinary hearing have been stellar. My interpretation of F is, despite historical performance, there might be conditions under which that would not present any impediment. Like, there's no guarantee based on a great performance review that this individual cannot be disciplined or terminated. That's how I read F. Is that a fair interpretation? And I don't have a problem with that, but sure. So if it was asked that I repeat what I just said. Well, let me repeat my question. My interpretation of F was, no performance review of the town manager by a select board, and no defect or omission by a select board in the performance review. There are two parts there of the town manager shall constitute an impediment or barrier to removal or suspension under this section. My interpretation of that language was such that, say, hypothetically, we had a town administrator that was performing, 5 out of 5 glowing recommendations, glowing support and performance reviews up until the point of some issue came up that warranted consideration of discipline or termination. My read on this is that those past strong performance reviews shall not present an impediment to taking decisive action if warranted.
It's not crystal clear.
Okay.
Okay?
Thank you.
Yeah, it's not crystal clear. I think the no defect or omission,
right, that
or omission in the performance review of a town manager, but no performance review could mean, does that mean failure to hold a performance review, or does it mean the content of the prior performance reviews? It's not crystal clear.
Right. So given that, I would ask for at least clarification on what F is before we support it. But I support the intent of the preamble, if not section F.
Yeah, I think so.
Could I just make a clarification?
Briefly, please.
Yeah. I'm sorry, having too many tabs open here. So, yeah, I did say omission, and because in the red line version of my amendment, it had been struck out. But yes, thank you, Attorney. That addition to that is problematic. I appreciate what's being said, but I think that it introduces uncertainty, and I think it's a concern. So.
You have one on Zoom.
Okay. And Ms. Wolfschlager. Thanks, Rich.
Thank you, Linda Bolschlager, Finance Committee. I just want to clarify a little bit about the discussion about this piece at the Finance Committee, and I think both of those situations were discussed, meaning that reviews might have been given where I think the term was soft-pedaled because people are sometimes reluctant to give bad reviews, but the case where a review was missing, where a town administrator had not been reviewed, was also part of the discussion. And that's something that I felt very strongly about, that I don't believe that it would be fair to the town administrator to have a select board that would not that was not timely in their reviews and had been presenting reviews. So this part of it I had a lot of trouble. Thank you.
Okay. It sounds to me, following up on Mr. Joseph's idea, is we support this in concept, but we want to see this clarified and tightened up.
I think we should separate it. I think we should support the preamble change about attendance, and
yeah, that's true.
And then ask for clarification or removal of F.
Yeah.
as well as the minor edits through, A through E as well.
Well, the rest of them are like town manager.
Right, so just being clear, we accept everything except F.
Yeah, well, those are a different amendment. Those,
that's
the
amendment
change to
A.
town manager is all Amendment B.
Right, thank you.
Okay, fair enough. Just want to take a seat over there? You're getting in your steps.
Just to consider with respect to this language, one of the first defenses that any terminated employee is going to raise is, I didn't have a performance review, my performance review was good. This language gives the select board, notwithstanding whether a court is going to give this any weight or not, it gives the select board more flexibility in their personnel decisions, and that's just something you should think about.
Okay. But I think we do just need to get clarity on what is intended here and see if it could be reworded or worded more clearly.
I guess my question to us is, what do we want? This is directly related to our board.
Yeah.
We should be directional here.
Yeah.
Well, if I may.
Are you done?
Yeah.
If I may, I think one of the things, and I, I've had conversations with Jamie about things like this. One of the things we have to consider really strongly, because any candidate for town administrator is going to read our charter.
Mm-hmm.
And if it's possible that that clause would make them less likely to accept a job, which might be true, it's something to also take into account, and in terms of what we want.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So I do think that needs to be really carefully wordsmithed, not necessarily by us here, but so I would, that's my take on it. Because yes, we want the flexibility, but at the same time, we don't want to drive people away.
If I may, I think this has been a non-issue, and my attitude is take it out. This is a very tailored select board statement that was done without input from the select board or compulsion by the select board. I just don't see why we're adding it in the first place.
Yeah, so the motion I would make, if I were making a motion, is to, support the preamble changes and remove paragraph F.
Okay, do I have a seconder?
I'll second that.
Okay. Any discussion?
To the conversation about because this is also including the majority vote about removing a town manager as well, right?
Yeah.
That's the preamble, I think.
Okay. A lot of the reasons that were given for it were, to me, more along the lines of obstruction. And I didn't see it that way. I saw it in the way that if someone, for whatever reason, was not able to be present, that this would move forward.
Previously, I think it's more the case of that it couldn't move forward. If we're in a situation where the board feels removal is warranted and one person doesn't, or I'll say 4/5 of the board feel yes, it needs to be heard and discussed, and one disagrees, right? That the way it was in the charter previously, that one person could opt not to show up for a meeting and torpedo the discussion. What this does is it prevents that from being a possibility.
Okay.
But it also, takes into account, one member is in the hospital and can't show up, is physically unable, right? The board still needs to be able to do its business.
True, that's another.
So, they're basically the tyranny of the majority and,
Stuff happens.
and yeah, stuff happens.
But with reasonable efforts to wait for that discharge and
Right.
wait
Yeah,
for that
exactly.
to enable that person, right? So
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
where reasonableness comes in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. All right.
You put me down for abstention.
Okay, 401. Okay, amendment. All right, time check. We got about 12 minutes after 10. We're now on Amendment L. Clearly, we're not going to make it all the way to U. How far do we want to be able to go?
I would say we stop here.
Yeah, I was going to say, let's schedule another.
Okay,
Bruce, do you want me to send a doodle poll?
I can do that.
Okay.
Okay, thank you all. We are going to, well...
Move to
have do-
adjourn.
oh,
Second.
we have to, any correspondence you want to let us know about, John?
Nothing for this evening.
Good answer.
I move to adjourn.
Okay, second was Rich.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone else wants to stay? Have at it.